If you have donated and have not received your video, shoot me an email. Y'all know what time it is. There are so many key players in Harlem at this time, it's impossible to cover them all in one episode. Harlem was the place where every fancy Showtime Negro wanted to live. The penthouses of the upper Negrostocracy were some of the most plush in the city. These were the first generations of Front Street fancy coons on display for the masses of American pop culture. By the 1930s, white people were starting to become fans of some pretty special Negroes. And these Negroes would have never been embraced by whites in the years before. Poets, singers, dancers, even authors, essentially entertainment was the black person's getaway into the Harlem spotlight. During this time, literature was the top propaganda of the day, and reading was considered entertainment. Beginning in the 1900s, Harlem saw a dramatic influx of West Indian immigrants, but most notably Southern blacks migrating from the South during the earliest times of the Great Migration. The early days of the Harlem hype were a best-kept secret from white America. But after the promotion of the Harlem Renaissance, the mainstream public became aware of all of the happenings uptown, and they were quite interested. Carl von Vechten's book, Nigger Heaven, was possibly the most popular source in promoting the Harlem Renaissance to white America. His book was a national bestseller. A white man from a wealthy family from Iowa was seen as a controversial figure in the history of the Harlem Renaissance. On one hand, he promoted the movement to the mainstream public, but the title of his book offended many people, including his friends. Not only this, but von Vechten is seen as being a little too comfortable at the cookout. His cookout shenanigans got under many a Negro skin. His friends were the leading patrons of the Renaissance: Zora Neale Hurston, Langston Hughes, Wallace Thurman. However, his homoerotic characterization of black men and sexualization of black culture in general seemed to rub niggas the wrong way.
Brother, what's that?
And he was often criticized for his lascivious depictions of black culture.
What's that, brother?
An openly gay man who also kept a wife vexed many black individuals of the time who found it problematic to see him dating black women and flaunting them flamboyantly throughout the streets of Harlem, especially after being associated with cross-dressing male prostitutes. Especially during a time when segregation persisted in places like the Cotton Club, where black musicians could perform, but black patrons could not attend, von Vechten found it humorous, emboldening, even satisfying to take black women for experiences they could not have with black men. The women often found in his company were perceived by black men as being brazen, shameless Jezebels, perfectly intent to do as they will in the name of women's rights, philandering through the city with flamboyant white men who, by funding some of the most popular black women in the community, these gay men were becoming the influential force within this new Negro movement. Langston Hughes had Alain Locke's nose wide open. Locke spent time with Hughes in Europe, romanticizing him, only to be abandoned by Hughes after a moment of intimacy. Damn! He fucked and ducked on them. He poked and smoked. He achieved and leaved. Hughes penetrated and evaporated. And this had Locke fucked up in his mind. He was on that ragtime crash out, only to be abandoned by Hughes after a moment of intimacy. Oh, you know that fucked him up. He's like, what's wrong with me? Now he's questioning if his butt's any good. Got banged by old Lang. Then Lang sprang. And Alan sang the blues.
Black delegation request Eminem.
Wait a goddamn minute, Rondell. That's not part of the party.
The slave narrative has so many angles that the fictional possibilities are infinite. Just ask Mr. Haley. Mr. Haley had conceded that parts of Roots were fictionalized, but he denied that he had knowingly made any factual errors. He defended his book about his ancestors as a symbolic history of a people. Oh, whoa, we gotta backtrack. He got a moonwalk on that shit, right? Hold on. This is a symbolic history of a people, all right? This isn't about my people per se. It's about a people in general. Adam Clayton Powell Sr. was the minister of the church during the hottest times in Harlem and had grown the congregation to over 10,000 people, making it one of the largest Baptist congregations in the world. This made Powell perhaps the most influential Black man in all of America. But was he really even Black, though? Despite his light complexion and blue eyes, several supposedly trusted publications regard Powell as an African American. But his ancestry and genealogical records show no African or so-called Black ancestors. Born in Virginia, the Black ancestry he supposedly has is really Indian from his mother's side. She was listed on the 1860 census as a free person of color. A man with traceable white and Indian blood identifies himself as African. This would also be a common theme throughout the course of this movement. According to Powell, he never knew his father. Another common theme. All of these antebellum, early 20th century American heroes never know their father, and their father is the supposed missing deadbeat dad. And the deadbeat dad is always a white dad, especially white planters. Some of these men were so despicable they would enslave their own children for $1 and then sell their own children for $2 or maybe even 50 cents. According to Powell, he never knew his father. However, local rumors in Halesford, Virginia say that he is most likely a descendant of Lewin Powell, a white planter of the same surname who lived near the area his mother was from. During his later days in Harlem, it is said that Powell identified as Black, but he had long been passing for white in the South before moving north. It was in the North his popularity rose to celebrated proportions. And it was in the North where he would assert his Black identity. But for as much as he was celebrated in Harlem, it was his son who stole the show. Powell Sr. preached at the Abyssinian Baptist Church for over 30 years before retiring. When he retired, he handed over the reins to his son, Adam. Adam Clayton Powell Jr. would become a Harlem hero and one of the key figures within the early Black Power movement, the new face of the Democratic Party, and the perpetual cookout invitee. Speculation about the Clayton Powell bloodline has always been at the forefront of the conversation throughout the life of Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Blessed with the holy gift of gab, he had an almost Jim Jones influence over the local Harlem community. The white-looking man who preached and talked like a black man with the nerve to spit that hot, greasy fire at the white power establishment. He possessed the ultimate light-skinned license to talk reckless, to the point that many of the most militant black leaders of the time saw him as the strongest voice in the black community.
I'm just in
People in New York send Powell to Washington, D.C. As long as Powell speaks like a black man. And the day that Powell ceases to speak like a black man, you'll find that black people in New York will cease to send Harlem to black people in New York will cease to send Powell to Washington. So I give you that answer. I'm not saying that Powell is right or Powell is wrong. That's not the question. But Powell does represent black people to the degree that black people support him. But most of these other Negro leaders that you see running around here are nothing but Uncle Toms outright who have no independent voice of their own, and you never hear them open up their mouth until the white man gives them the right to open up their mouth. And then when they open up their mouth, they always take great care not to alienate what they consider to be the white liberal.